We'll start in just a minute. We still have a lot of people joining us, and I think we'll start at 7:05 Brazil time. So just give us one more minute. This is wonderful. So I'm going to say something and I might repeat it afterwards because this is important. So it would be important for everyone to hear it. But this is a unique opportunity, having this event with so many people from so many countries and having the event held entirely in Portuguese. I don't know if I can think of any meeting of this sort with so many people, so many interpreters from so many countries using Portuguese as the default language. So that's a very new and interesting experience for us. That really is wonderful, Célia. We're very happy we're very proud of that. Okay, so I think we can officially begin. All right, we are right on time. We have a lot of people who are waking up early or are still up late. So we're going to try to be on time. So again, we want to express our joy and pleasure in having you with us. We have colleagues from all over the world with us for the World Hearing Day. This event is titled Interpretation and Hearing Health. So we're very happy here at AIIC Brazil and APIC, which is the Brazilian Interpreters Association. And my name is Larissa Benevides. I am from a city called Belo Horizonte in Brazil. I'm a member of both associations, and I'm currently the head of AIIC Brazil. I'm in the advisory board for AIIC Brazil, and it's a huge honor to be here as one of your hosts, along with Célia Kfouri. Hi, my name is Célia Kfouri. I'm currently the chairwoman at APIC, and I'm also a member at AIIC. And we're also here with some of our board members from APIC and AIIC Brazil. So we're going to chair this event today. That's right. Thank you. And again, it's a huge honor to have so many people here. As Célia said, this is a very important topic for us, hearing health and interpretation. Right. And before we begin, we just have some important announcements on the use of interpretation here in Zoom. So as a reminder, this entire event will be held in Portuguese, but we have simultaneous interpretation available in Spanish, English, French, Russian, and Chinese. If you need it, you can click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to select your preferred language. If you have any technical issues or any problems, just send us a message through the chat. We have many co-hosts, and they will all be paying attention to support you in whatever you need. This event is being recorded, so if you have any issues with that, you may keep your cameras turned off. Thank you, Célia. Okay, so the World Hearing Day is officially celebrated on March 3rd. So this has been held every year since 2010, when the WHO decided to select that date as a date to create awareness for hearing health. The aim of this day is really to make people aware of the importance of preventing hearing loss. And more than that, to promote hearing health. So far, according to the most recent studies we've seen, the World Health Organization estimates that we have about 1.5 million people with some sort of hearing disability. And this is expected to grow significantly by 2050. So today's event has this as its aim, my dear colleagues. First, to give visibility to this topic, to make use of this date that was just recently passed. And in fact, we didn't celebrate it on March 3rd because we were going to compete with Brazilian Carnival. And on March 10th, some of our speakers were unavailable. So that's why we're celebrating it today on March 17. But it is officially celebrated on March 3rd. So again, the aim here is to create awareness about this issue, especially our community, the interpreters community, because we are naturally more exposed due to the nature of our work. So that's why we wanted to create more awareness on prevention and professional care by a hearing specialist, by a doctor. That's right. And that's why the second goal for today's meeting is to publish the results from a survey that was carried out on hearing health by the Brazilian Interpreters Association. This process started in 2022. Andréa Negreda, which was the chairwoman at the time, and she is one of our guests today, started this survey. And this was a very interesting time because we were still going through the COVID pandemic. We still hadn't resumed our regular work. So that allowed interpreters, our entire community, to be able to pay attention to its hearing health. So the data from this study will be shared with us today by Andréa. This was started in the Brazilian Interpreters Association, and then it was expanded to AIIC because our associations believe that we have a role to play in creating awareness and supporting interpreters with this issue. That's right, Célia, that was very well said. And that's the intention behind this event. We want to put our associations to play their role. And that's why we invited today Liang Joo Leow, who is in AIIC Science Hub Health Workstream. And he is going to start our event today. He's going to make some opening remarks and tell us a little bit about this effort that has been led by the Science Health Hub. Afterwards, we're going to hear from Natália Taddei, another one of our dear Brazilian colleagues. She is very active in the health work stream. She's a member there, and she's been doing great work. And she's going to tell us about the physiology of hearing, which many of us don't know. Understanding physiology is probably one of the most important steps in creating awareness. After that, we're going to hear from Andréa Negreda, who Célia just mentioned, and she's going to tell us about the results from this study. And finally, we're going to hear a very inspiring testimonial from Layla Penha. She is a dear colleague who overcame some hearing challenges and continues to be a very successful interpreter. That's right. So before we begin, thank you to our speakers. We would also like to thank Liang Joo. And without a doubt, we want to thank our team of interpreters, which are making this event possible in a multilingual, international way. So thank you very much for sharing your talent with us, as well as your time in order to make this happen. This really was the foundation for this to be planned. So thank you very much on behalf of the board of directors at APIC and AIIC Brazil. We hope that this is a great day for awareness and that you receive a lot of information. So I think we can start with Liang Joo. And thank you very much for joining us from your time zone. Thank you.
It's a great honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My talk this morning will be a brief one introducing the Science Hub Health Workstream. The Science Hub Health Workstream is made up by 5 AIIC members. So there's me, Gabriela Verdi from Italy, and Ana Laura Arias de Segovia from Paraguay, Natália Taddei, we're all familiar with, as well as Peter Lazaru from Romania. Now, we're a group of both current and former health professionals. I myself am a dermatologist, and Peter was once a doctor, and Natalia, Gabriela work in allied health, and Ana Laura has been a chemical pathologist in the past. The workstream has a broad and inclusive mission for interpreter health as well as interpreter well-being. So while our focus hasn't been entirely on hearing only, we're aiming to have a purview that encompasses health in general. So our aims are to provide information, assistance, and support to the membership, to educate and inform stakeholders, to document, promote, and disseminate best practice guidelines, to keep up with relevant developments and contribute to innovation, and also to establish and maintain an updated list of relevant publications. We're looking for opportunities for AIIC to be involved in interpreter health-related matters, and also to consult and collaborate with other Science Hub health streams, work streams rather, and with other AIIC committees and groups. We're aiming to support and engage in matters concerning interpreter health. For members who joined us at the Lima Assembly, you may be familiar with seeing us around. Our current initiative at the moment is to develop a universal non-verbal signal to indicate to organizers as well as to technicians that the audio quality is bad. So method 1 you can see on the left is we turn our backs to the presenters and then we adopt this position. Method 2, if you've got a stiff back or if you had baked beans for breakfast, is yes. No, that's right? Oh, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Now, what I was saying is these images present 2 of our current initiatives as concerns hearing health. So these are methods that we're trying to develop in terms of non-verbal signals to give to both organizers as well as to technicians that the audio quality is poor, just as you've indicated to me just then verbally. So the first one on the left is that we would turn our backs to the presenters and bend forward in this position. The second one would be if you've had too much baked beans for breakfast or if you've got a stiff back, is to adopt this dance that Natalia is doing. But in all seriousness, these are actually images from what we did at the Lima Assembly, which was to hold morning wellness sessions at the start of each day. On the left, you can see Natalia, and I'm giving instruction as the yoga instructor. And on the right, Natalia gave us a session on both physical as well as voice warm-up before an interpreting session. In terms of hearing health, our focus at the moment is to raise awareness about both the importance of hearing health, not only in terms of audio shock, but also, as any good yogi would say, that we approach the world both outwardly and inwardly, is to look at what we can do in terms of preserving our health, in terms of our hearing health, and what we can do to make sure that we maintain our hearing health. To that end, Natalia and I will be producing a podcast approaching the importance of hearing tests and what components are in a hearing test and what we can interpret from them ourselves. So it is very encouraging and wonderful to hear of the innovative project being conducted by AIIC Brazil at the moment in terms of the survey. That's all I have to say for now. I'll leave you with the next slide, which is a reflection by one of our group members in terms of hearing health, which was published in the most recent AIIC Digest. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Liang Joo, for your words. You're doing admirable work, really. It's great to have so many people doing all of this. So that's why we would like to underscore how important it is to have volunteers, because we need people to do so much great work. And we have to do our own share. We have to value these efforts. So thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that you can stick around until the end. But of course, if you cannot because of your time zone, we would really like to thank you for being here. And now I'd like to invite Andréa Negreda, who will be our second speaker for today. Andréa is a conference interpreter who's a member of AIIC and APIC, and she was president of APIC for the 2019 to 2021 biennium. So welcome, and feel free to share your screen with us, Andréa. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can I ask Natália to go first? She's going to tell us about physiology, which I think will work as a natural sequence. So if we can do that. Great, thank you. So let me introduce Natália. Natália, first of all, thank you for joining us. Natália is a conference interpreter. She's a member of AIIC and APIC. She has a degree in speech and hearing therapy from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and she's an interpreter trainer at the Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro and is a member of the Health Workstream at the AIIC Science Hub. So welcome, Natália. Thank you, Larissa, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here in an event being held fully in Portuguese, with a brief introduction in English, but it is a great international event, and thank you for inviting me to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, it looks better now. So like Larissa said, and as Andréa repeated, my presentation is going to be a very basic talk on the anatomy and physiology of hearing. So as we heard, the title is The Sound's Path to the Brain. This animated GIF is a summary. And we're going to go into the details of what you're seeing in this image. So when we think about hearing, normally the first thing that comes to mind is the ear. And when you think about the ear, the first thing that comes to mind is what you see, the outer ear, but it's actually split into three parts: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. But we usually call the outside the ear. But since I'm saying that we're going to talk about the ear, I just like to make it clear that we have 3 ears, not just one. So its role is threefold. We are, twofold: listening and balance. So there's a hearing part and a balance part, the labyrinth. And it's split into three parts: the outer, middle, and inner ear. Yes, Angela is correcting me. We actually have 6 ears. So you're seeing an image of these 3 parts of the ear and a zoomed in part of your inner ear. So let's talk about these 3 parts. So you're seeing here the most beautiful ear in the world, my son's ear. And of course, I'm completely unbiased in my comment. But this is the outer ear, which comprises the auricle, the ear canal, and the tympanic membrane or eardrum, which cannot be seen without a tool, without an otoscope. So let's start with each component of the outer ear. The auricle has two roles. It directs sound to the ear canal. So all of the folds that might seem random to your ear are not random. Sound waves come in your direction, they bounce on these folds, and they get redirected into your ear canal. And the difference on how the sound waves come to your auricle help you to find where the sound is coming from. And then we have the ear canal. And this is not something that we regard very much, but it's very important. The ear canal is the path that sound takes to get to the eardrum. Its role is to protect. So imagine if your eardrum was very close to your outer ear. It would be very easy to puncture and get hurt. And it's composed of a cartilaginous and a bony section. And Larissa has said this before. This is something that I truly believe in, and I always try to do at the university. I think we have to know our work tools so that we can take care of them. So this is just a side note, and that because that goes for your hearing and your voice. These are our work tools. So it's essential to know what you have so that you can take care of it. So let's continue. It protects your inner ear, and it's composed of the cartilaginous and the bony portions. So the pink part here represents your cartilage. It's the same kind of cartilage that you have in your auricle. And this is where earwax is produced. This is also where you have some hairs that throw or push this earwax outwards. So when you clean your ear with a Q-tip, with a cotton swab, you're actually pushing that earwax in. So this is a tip for you. Don't use a cotton swab to push your earwax in. Clean it with a towel. So let's continue with the eardrum, which is actually a part of the outer and middle ear because it splits them. It's in the middle of both. So in these images, you can see eardrums. On the left, you're seeing a beautiful, shiny, translucent eardrum. You can see through it. You can see one or two ossicles there. And on the right, you're seeing a poor child with pediatric otitis. So it is swollen. This eardrum is pushing out, and it's red, and this poor child is probably in a lot of pain. The eardrum is also protective. In this case, it's protecting your middle ear. The eardrum also does something very important. It transforms sound waves into mechanical energy. And later on, I'll explain why it does it. It also expands that mechanical energy to your bone ossicle chain. Now, let's understand why this happens. Why is it transforming and amplifying that energy? So consider this. I'm going to go back to the first image, to that animation. So sound is traveling through the air. Sound waves are being transmitted through the air. These sound waves are reflected into the ear canal to vibrate your eardrum. But what if I told you that the cells that can hear this, your true hearing organ is your cochlea. And these cells are immersed in a liquid. Have you tried to scream underwater? Don't you need to be much louder to listen to someone underwater? So for the sound waves that are coming from air to go into a liquid medium with the same intensity, this needs to be amplified. And the way that nature, natural selection, or whoever found to do this was by transforming sound wave energy into mechanical wave energy, amplify it through these oscilles for the same intensity to come to a liquid medium. Okay, so let's go back. And now we can tell you about the middle ear and the ossicles. This is your middle ear. It's a cavity filled with air normally. So it's still an air medium, but it is not the same as your outer ear. Because if you see that descending tube, that's your auditory tube. This is what balances the pressure from your outside environment to your middle ear. When you feel like your ear is plugged, that's because something is going wrong with your auditory tube. It's either because you have a cold or because you changed air pressure very quickly. And here you also have the three ossicles, which are the smallest bones in the human body: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. So as your eardrum moves, it's going to push these ossicles. And do you see the tip of the stapes? It touches your inner ear as it moves. And this structure is called the oval window. So what happens is your eardrum is relatively, in comparison to the oval window, much smaller. So as it vibrates, and plus the movement from all of the ossicles, it takes all of this mechanical energy to a much smaller surface, the oval window. And that's what amplifies the energy being pushed there. So we've now arrived at your inner ear. So sound comes in through your ear canal, vibrates your eardrum, which moves the ossicles, which displace that energy to the oval window, which then moves that liquid in the cochlea. The cochlea is your true auditory organ, your true hearing organ. It's this snail-shaped or shell-shaped part at the bottom. Not the loops. The loops are for balance, and this is a completely different thing that we're not going to discuss here. We don't have enough time because it's already been 10 minutes. And by the way, this cochlea is filled with liquid. It's a liquid medium. In that liquid, we have our hair cells, which perceive sound. I don't know if that's the best verb to use, but that's what I'm going to use. They receive that sound stimulus and they transform it from liquid movement, because they fire as they move, and it provides signals to your neurotransmitters and to your auditory nerve. This is what happens. Now, let me show you those cells. So this is there's the cochlea before. So this is the shape of the cochlea. It's a spiral. And these hair cells are organized throughout the cochlea with that pattern. Do you see that section that looks like a fringe? They're organized into groups, and each group responds to a certain frequency. So if you have a lower frequency, it's going to fire a certain group. If you have a higher frequency, a different group will fire, and so on and so forth. This is called tonotopy. And what is interesting about this is that when you receive a sound wave, this liquid moves and triggers these cells, the hair cells. So think about how you are exposed to sound currently. If you think about how the world was, I mean, it wouldn't even be so long ago, 40 years ago, we didn't even receive the same amount of sound that we receive now. We weren't exposed to this much sound. And hair cells are not replaced. You don't get new hair cells. You get a certain number when you're born, and that's never going to increase. You're only going to lose these cells. And we know that the intensity of this exposure is directly connected to cell death and hearing loss. So it really is like saving. You have to save your ears. You have to rest them, which is increasingly difficult now. I really like this image, which looks like a lawn, and I don't remember who described it that way, but I really liked that word. It really looks like grass growing. Of course, it's a strange kind of grass, red, but let's pretend that's what it is. Just as in a field of grass, if you're only walking once on top of it, someone is saying that there are some barriers there. I like that. So when you walk over a field, a grass field, that grass comes back up. But if you walk over it many times, or if many people go, that kills the grass. That creates a trail. That creates a path. The grass no longer grows there. On the other hand, even if you go through that path many times on the same day, if you don't the next day, that grass is going to recover. It's not going to regenerate completely, but they are able to go back up. So we have to think about our hearing that way, and we cannot step too much on that grass. You need to have some times to rest, and your times to rest also need to include your hearing. If you're going to relax by listening to loud music, you're relaxing, but your hearing is still being worn out. And one other thing that we often do is if we go to a noisy place, we might put we might put earphones to listen to a podcast even louder so that you don't hear all that noise. Everyone does it. If you're on the airplane, on the subway, on the bus, we even do it in our cars. Sometimes we prefer to use a headset instead of listening to your audio system in your car. So that's the message that I had for you. The main message here is to save your hearing because it is your work tool. And that's my main message for you. And I hope that you understood this. I hope that you understand, that we have a precious jewel in our heads, in our ears, and that's it. If you have any questions, I can answer them at the end. I can answer any questions you may have about what I'm discussing here. Thank you.
That's right. We will have time for questions and answers at the end. Thank you so much for that wonderful, informative class. That was fantastic. And now, yes, Andréa Negreda, our third guest of the evening. Andréa is also a conference interpreter, former president of APIC from 20 to 2022, I believe, 2019 to 2021 of the Brazilian Conference Interpreters Association. She's here with us tonight. Thank you so much. Feel free to share your screen. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. AIIC Brazil, thank you for this invitation. It is wonderful to be here among friends and colleagues. It's great to be able to talk about things that are so important to us. Hearing. I have a kind of a conflict of interest here because in a not so recent past, well, in a distant past, I was actually a phonologist. I worked with hearing, just like Natália. It's been a while since I've done that. And they invited me and they said I can't talk on behalf as if I were a doctor because they're gonna get upset with me, but no. But since Natália gave a wonderful class and she talked all about the anatomy and the physiology of our ears, it's a little easier to talk about hearing, which is what we're here to do today. We actually have a bit of bias, right? There's hearing and there's listening and there's speaking. All of it is so important for us. We need to speak well. We have to have a great voice, but we also have to listen very well. These are our basic tools of the trade. So wonderful that we are talking today entirely about hearing, and I think that is absolutely critical. I'd like to start by sharing my slides. And these are two very simple questions. So we're using Menti. If you could connect to Menti, I appreciate it. There's a QR code on the screen. But there's also a number on the top. You can go to menti.com and plug in the code that you see on the top of the screen, 65628172. The question is, have you had a hearing test at any point in the last 2 years? We've been talking about the importance of hearing. We've been talking about how it's important to take precautions. But does that include getting a test? That should be on our checklist of periodic health exams, yearly, annual checkups, perhaps. So it's important that we include this as part of our checkup. Not bad, everybody. 31 people said yes, they have had a hearing test at some point in the last 2 years. 16 no, and one person has never had a hearing test. Doesn't know if they hear well or poorly. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I'm going to write this down. The majority have had a hearing test at some point in the last 2 years. I'll give you a few more seconds. And before I move on to the next question, just double checking, were you able to get into menti.com and answer the question? I believe so. Okay, time for question 2. Oh, wait a second. Before we move on to question 2, 35 to 23, 35 yes, 23 no. But we're still at only one person who has never had a hearing test. Not bad. Next question. Can you assess your hearing? Is it really good, or it used to be better? I'm watching the screen here. I see lots of my friends with glasses. Lots of us, as we get older, use glasses. But hearing too starts to suffer. There's hearing loss that naturally happens over time. I'm sure many of you have had grandparents, parents who have lost hearing over time. We expect the same for us, but a little bit, moving forward. Not right now, not right now. In theory, right now, our hearing should be at either really good or good. Okay, so 13%, 13 people said it used to be better. I'm going to write this down. 32, excellent or really good. 13, good. 14, it used to be better. I'm going to stop sharing. And now I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see this? Ready to go. Okay, I've already talked about my conflicts of interest. Okay, so if you take me to the Fonoaudiologist Board in Brazil, I am not responsible, but I do have some knowledge of this area, of this field, so I thought at least I can share that with you here right now. So the project started back in 2020, roughly. We were all going through this phase of trying to reinvent ourselves. We were smack in the middle of the pandemic. We left the booths and we had to figure out how the world works in remote simultaneous. There was quite a bit of, there was a lot of novelty right in the beginning. We were able to adapt, but there was a lot more of a burden that we were facing, or a hearing burden that we were facing. So we thought, hey, why not get together some of our specialists? I was a phonoaudiologist. I had some friends in the field, and I knew people. I talked to some of my friends, and I decided to call up 2 specialists. And I said, what do you think? What if we look at our interpreter's hearing and check out what the health is like, not just peripherically, like how it's working, the transmission of sound to reaching until it reaches the cochlea, but processing as well. Again, it hits the cochlea and it hits our nucleus, it hits our brain, and that's where it's processed. And they thought this was a fascinating idea. Let's do a study to understand interpreters' hearing a little bit better. So this was a project. We started to really build it out a little bit more in 2021, stage 1. We started with a talk. Our specialists in hearing, Katia Freire and Ana Claudia Fiorini, gave a very interesting talk on hearing, and they talked about understanding, perfection, etc. It was kind of a kickoff talk. And then we developed a survey. Purpose of the survey was to understand perception and hearing details and comparing the responses, or what the perception is prior to and subsequent to the boom in RSI. Is it hard to work from home? Is it easier to work from home? We were looking for a correlation between hearing and general health, the impact that it has on health, that noise has on health, and what were the interpreters' conditions on their mental health. During the pandemic, we all certainly felt it. Hearing was absolutely affected. There was heavy load. Natália just talked about there's a heavy hearing load. And obviously this had some repercussions on our physical health in general. So we developed a survey, it came forth, but we cleaned it up. 126 people responded. Some people had to be pushed, reminder, here's the link. We had people from APIC and AIIC, are 2 associations. AIIC, and APIC is the Brazilian Interpreters Association, and 126 people ultimately responded to this survey. And I'm going to share the results in a second. Okay, survey was done. We went into phase 2. We wanted to understand how people were hearing. Next step was testing people's hearing. So there was a set of tests that were designed For peripheral hearing, which is audiometry, and both tonal and vocal, there was the acoustic imitance. Again, that hits how it hits the eardrum, how it hits the ossicles. And finally, an assessment of central hearing processing. Okay, once we get it all the way down, how is our brain processing this information? So all these tests were developed, and they're very specialized. And of course, they're not part of people's health plan. So we reached some agreements as on behalf of the associations with specific hearing clinics, auditory clinics. And since we have interpreters living in a number of cities in Brazil, we offered these tests and these very low-cost tests in these specialized clinics in cities throughout Brazil where we have interpreters. That's Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Belo Horizonte, Brasília, Porto Alegre, Salvador, Recife, and Florianópolis. Belém as well. And the association paid for all of these tests. APIC and AIIC paid for these exams at each of these hearing clinics. The only thing the interpreters had to do was show up. There was only one requirement, which was rest, auditory rest. Interpreters needed 8 hours of auditory rest. So if you worked that morning, you shouldn't do your exam that afternoon. That would otherwise affect the results or skew the results. Of all those invited, 72 opted for the exam. Feedback was quite positive. The exams were carried out by highly qualified individuals who shared the results with the individuals. The associations did not receive this information. This is confidential. Everyone received their own private results, and they had the opportunity to speak with the hearing professionals to discuss what the results were. And this led to some very interesting insights for all of those who decided to take the tests. I'm just going to go over some of the very preliminary, superficial results. And these are some of the results from the exams themselves, as well as from the survey. Age distribution obviously affects the results. We know that most interpreters are between the ages of 40 and 60. Majority are women. We figured out what were the main working languages here in Brazil. It's English, Portuguese, and Spanish, and where people are located, mostly Sao Paulo and Rio. It's also interesting to note that when the survey was sent out, 98.6% of the interpreters were working from home during the pandemic. And this is critical. In Brazil, we quickly adapted to remote work and working from home. Most of us set up home offices quite quickly. And you can see this really quickly because more than 90% said that they were working in a satisfactory setting. They had good acoustics. They were in an isolated room. And so one thing that we see throughout the colleagues in Brazil is that we've got this very successful home office setup pretty soon after the pandemic starts. More questions in the survey. Have you ever experienced any of the following symptoms during your work during the pandemic? Some of them are purely related to hearing. These are absolute numbers. So you could list a number of symptoms, whatever number of symptoms, there was no limit. Zumbido is like a humming, you could be a dizziness, headaches, and you can see that some of them are general, but they're far more reaching. So stress, anxiety, exhaustion, tiredness, lack of attention and concentration. Obviously, it's very difficult to pull out and understand whether these are results of the work of your hearing problem or just a general stress of the situation, because it was quite a difficult time. It's very hard to really understand if it was a result of that catastrophic situation that we were all facing or if it was specifically related to RSI. These are symptoms that we see in the general population as well. a lot of extra effort, very difficult to concentrate. This was pretty widespread, not just among interpreters. Another question was carrying, how would you rate your fatigue and your efforts, your listening fatigue and the effort to listen prior to and post pandemic? People conveyed more fatigue and more effort in the hearing process. Clearly, that seems quite obvious to us. Again, it's not just auditory. We're facing an overburden of these stimuli during RSI. There's a lot of stimulation and we're facing a lot of things and juggling a lot of things at the same time. So it's very clear that this requires a lot more effort and clearly leads to more exhaustion. Similar question that I asked earlier. So how do you rate your hearing? 42% said that it was very good. 35% said that it was good. If we look at the results that popped up tonight, 32 said they had very good hearing, and 13 said they had good hearing. So same numbers, good. Most of us have good or very good hearing as we perceive it. So here's the question. Is this what we actually see in the exams, in those physical exams? So here's where we see if those numbers and our perception actually corresponds to what's happening physically. This is tonal audiometry. This is peripheral hearing. Do you hear? Do you not hear? Do I hear well? Those of you who have gone through an audiometry are very familiar with these very common tests in a hearing test. And we basically go down to the lowest sound that an interpreter can hear, the highest sound that an interpreter can hear. So 55.6% had normal hearing. 36.1% of the people had bilateral loss. That's 26 people, 36.1% bilateral loss. 6 people showed a unilateral loss. Now, what's really interesting is that when we look at the different frequencies, a lot of people who had bilateral loss lost a lot in the higher range frequencies, which is normal. It's normal to what we see as we age. This is the same thing that we see when people start to have vision loss as they get older, presbyopia. It's the same thing. So it's very general, but basically the hearing loss, the type of hearing loss that we're seeing corresponds to age. This is the additional test. This is a central auditory or auditory processing test. And there are 3 subtests that were conducted. One was a digit dichotic test, which is basically you needed to selectively pay attention to your processing capacity. You'd hear sounds coming in from each side simultaneously, and the person had to say what sounds they were hearing. The second test is a test for temporal resolution. Basically, it's looking to synchronize the auditory system. And the last one was a frequency standard test. Temporal coordination, the ability to hear one sound closer to the front, then closer to the back, location. Of all those 72 people who were tested, 24 expressed auditory loss. There was only 1 alteration or 1 change in the first test, 1 in the second, and 7 in the last test. Maybe the same person for number 1 and 2, we don't know. But it's really interesting. But peripheral hearing is being compensated by central hearing and processing. Because we're certainly off the curve here. We've got excellent central processing. We speak in a foreign language while we're hearing in one language, and we're processing at the same time. People think this is par for the course, but this is impressive work. And you can clearly see here that interpreters have excellent central processing skills. Obviously, these are preliminary results, but it gives us a general overview of what we were seeing. So this is a very imperfect overview of what we see. There's no statistical analysis here. We need to check if a variable 1 compares to variable 2 and so on and so on. We've got to do a deep dive, so we haven't been able to do that yet. But we can start talking about the data, even though we don't have the full picture. But it's a great starting point for us to understand how where our hearing really stands. Hopefully, other markets will pursue initiatives that are similar to this or offer tests like what we offered to their interpreters as well. This is also a flag. Tell your interpreters, of the 72 people who went through those battery of tests, 7 of them had 32% had, or 32 of them had some sort of hearing loss, and they could have compensated one way or another. I'm not going to tell you what's going to, too much, but Layla will be talking a little bit about this in her next talk. But this is an opportunity for us to explore. Again, World Hearing Day, World Health Organizations, it's his World Health Organizations initiative. It happens every March 3rd. You can go onto the website. There are a lot of resources. There are a lot of ideas and campaigns. It's very valuable. Let's talk a little bit more about our hearing. We don't want to talk about technical things, give solutions, answers, this and that. We want to talk more about hearing, and we need to bring this to the forefront. So thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information and this survey with you. And I'm proud to share this initiative with you. And now I'd like to pass the mic back to our hosts. Thank you very much. Wow, Andrea, that's amazing. Great to see these preliminary results. I was quite excited to hear what you had to say. Wonderful work that you did. Hopefully, some other associations throughout the world will follow in your footsteps. But I'll talk a little bit more later. Thank you so much. I'd now like to invite Layla to talk. Layla's practically an influencer here. She's incredible. She has a culinary channel on YouTube. It's called the Lazy Interpreter, Lazy Cooker, Cooking Interpreter. She is a conference interpreter. She's also a member of AIIC and APIC. And we're really excited to hear what you have to tell us. Thank you so much. Let me also share my screen with you. Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here to talk about this topic that's so important to all of us. It's also quite personal to me. It's great to be here with this international community of interpreters and to have this opportunity to converse and for me to share my experience with you. I also want to thank our colleagues volunteering, interpreting today, and I hope to be a somewhat easier interpreter for you. So before starting, also a disclaimer, just to be clear, this is a layperson's presentation. This is based on information that I have picked up on my personal journey. My intentions are very good, but I am not an expert on this subject. When in doubt, please consult with a healthcare professional. Okay, disclaimers out of the way. Let's get to what matters. First off, why talk about healthy hearing practice? People talked about what we can do and hearing loss, but why is it so challenging for us interpreters to discuss healthy hearing practice? If we hear about best practices in the hearing community, there are a number of them. The first is the rule called the 60-60 rule. The basic idea is that when we're using headphones, ideally, we should keep this volume below 60%. And usage should be limited to a max of 60 minutes. Volumes above 85 decibels can cause damages to our hair cells, as Natália already mentioned. And auditory breaks are critical. We don't talk about this enough. Even in the booth, we agree to switch over every 20, every 30 minutes, but the entire time we keep those headphones on our ears. And it's important to take those phones off our heads. Professionals say that we should take those phones off for 10 to 15 minutes every hour or so. Now, that's a challenge for the booth. How do we support our colleagues if we're taking our headphones off? Maybe the best thing to do would be to listen to the ambient sound, the sound in the room. Maybe not ideal, but it at least ensures us a short auditory break. And after really intense auditory effort, we should ideally wait 24 hours before another demanding session. Ideally, we should, put a day in between the days we work. I know it's not always possible, but that's ideal. But of course, the truth is that in our profession, most of these best practices are almost impossible to follow. First, the 60-60 rule. Background noise and echo and the quality of incoming audio. Depending on what comes in, you can push up the volume and turn up the volume. So this is both in-person events and remote events. You see RSI meetings and lots of people have their mics on at the same time. The mic quality is poor. And all of these factors make listening difficult. And one way we try to compensate for these hurdles is increasing the volume on our headphones. Something else that's quite important is auditory fatigue, and Natália already mentioned that as well. The more tired we get from listening, the more we lose auditory perception. And that means we need greater stimulation to hear the same thing. And greater stimulation means turning up the volume. And finally, headphones. Andréa mentioned this. Most interpreters reported being in a pretty good setting, but that's not always a guarantee. We're exposed to a number of headphones. Some of them hurt our ears, push against our heads, but that's what it is. There's a theory in simultaneous interpretation, and I think it still needs to be studied. It's called auditory masking. And auditory masking stems from the very practice of simultaneous interpreting, which is listening and speaking at the same time. The sound of our voices reaches our ears externally through the air and also internally through bone conduction. We're listening to ourselves talk. This sound of our own voice can interfere with the hearing and with the understanding of the audio that we're receiving in the headphones. And when this happens, there's a natural tendency that we have to increase headphone volume. And we see this all the time with the newer interpreters. They sometimes start out shouting in the booth. And we do this because we keep increasing the listening volume to get to the point where we need to shout to hear ourselves. So just a little tip, if you can leave a little bit of breathing room or space in your headphones, you'll be doing yourself a world of good.
So the truth is, I've been an interpreter for 30 years, and after that effort, the repetitive strain got to me. So there was a loss detective, and he told me that this was compatible with hearing shock. It wasn't a huge hearing loss, but it was already noticeable. So when the pandemic hit and our world turned into RSI overnight, I was working with a client who had a huge demand for interpretation. And for 3 years, I worked 5 days a week, every day, several hours a day, which some people might call a blessing. But as you can see on my face, it took its toll. I dealt with enormous stress and a real difficulty in distinguishing sounds. So my first response to this was denial, complete denial. And I also started blaming others. No, I'm not responsible for what's happening to me. It's not my fault, which is very reminiscent of what we see in politics today, right? For our foreign colleagues, this is our ex-president, Bolsonaro. And whenever he was criticized, or whenever his administration was criticized, and even when he was threatened with punishment, he said, no, that is not my fault. I have a clean conscience. So in my case, in interpretation, I always thought, well, the sound was terrible today. The speaker was awful. I hate this platform. Or my booth mate wasn't paying attention, or today was a bad day for me. But at the end, you start to understand that maybe the problem is you, and that it's hampering your performance for sure. And for me, there was a new sign. I had a terrible lack of balance. I started having severe bouts of dizziness, and I knew that something was wrong. There's something going wrong here. So that's when my search began. So what was happening? First, I went to the EMT, and the diagnosis was that I was having a vertigo crisis. It's a kind of vertigo that basically happens when you move your head in a certain way, and that gives you a bout of dizziness, which is very short but very unpleasant. Along with that, I also took an audiometry. And actually, what happens with this vertigo is that the crystals in your inner ear move out of place, basically, and they cause this a bout of dizziness. And it's also stress-related. In any case, I had an audiometry, I had very bad results, and I had significant hearing loss. It was so significant that the doctor even suspected that I had an even more serious problem than I did. So she requested several exams, including an MRI, to rule out anything else. But fortunately, it wasn't. It was just significant hearing loss. And she referred me to an audiologist. So this is the second part of my journey. After denial, you start facing prejudice. And this is our own inner prejudice. And this, of course, is a personal testimony. But I started thinking, I'm not that old. Why should I wear a hearing aid? And in Brazil, there was a comedy show called A Praça é Nossa. And in this show, there was a character who was a deaf old lady, and she always got things wrong. So that was a joke that constantly people heard about hearing loss. It's not that you can't hear, it's not that you are completely deaf, but you have trouble distinguishing between different words. And I felt exactly like that old deaf woman at first. But that felt very strange because, hearing aids are nothing more than glasses for the ear. When you start having problems with your eyesight, you have to wear glasses for reading, for looking at something far away, and no one says anything. It doesn't hinder your work. If you see an ophthalmologist wearing glasses, that's absolutely common. But a hearing aid wearing interpreter seems like a joke, right? If you don't work with sign language. So it was very difficult to overcome this initial prejudice, which I think is related to this image here. Hearing loss is something that we connect with old ladies who are at their end of their life. And when we think about ophthalmologists, we think about, handsome doctors. That's not an issue. So that's how we start dealing with it when it happens to you. But I think the greatest tool against prejudice is information. And as I said, the specialist referred me to an audiologist who was incredible. She helped me a lot. And she started telling me about the hair cells that Natália mentioned, hyperacusis, NIHL, which started to make a lot of sense to me. And which I'm going to share with you very quickly because I think we just heard a very good talk about that. But basically, hair cells, as Natália said, have this dual function, not only to capture sound, but also to protect your ear from excessive noise. Obviously, this is limited. You're not going to stand next to a loudspeaker at a concert, but it does protect you to a certain extent. But with constant hyperactivation, after abuse, it starts to damage your stereocilia. And again, as we heard, this is irreversible. So this type of damage to your stereocilia leads to a condition that I think interpreters might notice on their daily life, which is hyperacusis, basically a hypersensitivity to sounds. About 2 years ago, we were at a colleague's birthday party, and it was a very open space. It was beautiful, very pleasant, but there was going to be a concert, and before that, they started a sound check. And there was a microphone burst. And my husband immediately said, I know who the interpreters are in this party because all interpreters cover their ears and grimaced. Excessive sound is painful. This is very real in our profession, I think. And finally, there's this loss, which is called NIHL, or noise-induced hearing loss, due to high volume, prolonged exposure, in-ear headphones, which apparently are worse than others. And all of this, unfortunately, causes us to lose the ability to hear perfectly. Maybe this is just a part of our profession. So that was it. I had a hearing loss. There was no other way except putting in a hearing aid. And then the tests began. It was a long process of trial and error. The first appointment was in December 2023, and I only started wearing my definitive device on April 11th. So it was practically 4 months between tests, and these were the 3 finalists. ReSound, Phonak, and Signia, which were my order of preference. So ReSound is a GN1. That's the model. It had a very clear sound, but it was so clear that it almost sounded a bit bionic, a bit metallic. It had that quality that bothered me. I heard my own voice and it sounded strange to me. It has a Bluetooth connection, but it's an ugly device. It doesn't look it in that picture, but it is. It's big. There's something that you have to wear behind your ear. And I don't know if that's what bothered me the most or if it was the metallic sound, which bothered me. There were several features that I really liked on how you can direct the sound. You can choose if you want to hear towards the front or surround. If you're in a restaurant, there are different modes. So you can select just hearing the conversation in front of you instead of all the background noise. So it has some great features, but it was not a match. It wasn't the type of sound that I needed. Then second place went to Phonak, a much prettier device. The model I tested was this one, Lumity. Its sound was excellent. It also has great health data monitoring. It counts steps, how long you've been wearing the device. It has audio targeting, but not as good as ReSound. And it has this device here called Roger, which is something that you purchase separately and which is incredible because it's a microphone that you can use and it's connected to your hearing aid constantly. So if you're in a meeting, in a boardroom, if it's a smaller meeting, you can just place your Roger in the middle of the table, and it's going to capture sound around you. And you hear it directly in your hearing aid. You don't need anything else. And the sound is incredible. We're used to portable equipment and the booth, but the sound you get from this is much cleaner and it's much better. It's far beyond what we're used to. And of course, it has a price. I don't know about our colleagues who are hearing us from abroad, but this can cost 20 to 30,000 Brazilian reals, and a Roger costs 10,000 reals, so it is expensive. And I ended up choosing this one, Signia. It's made by Siemens. This model is called Stiletto. It's beautiful, great design, but what I like the most is the charging case. It's able to charge your device even if you don't plug it into the socket. So it gives you 48 hours. It's almost like an AirPod case, and it's great. But the reason why I chose this one specifically is that it has a connection to your devices, whether it is a microphone or even your own personal smartphone. And this is done through the phone's connectivity feature. So it's like having a hearing aid in your iPhone or your Samsung. And in order to work, this is something that helps me a lot. If I'm working remotely, if I'm working from the computer, my connection to my booth mate is either through the iPhone or through the iPad, but it connects directly to my hearing aid. So I don't need to wear two headsets, which can be cumbersome when we're working. Usually we work an inner ear and an outer headset on top of it. So you don't need to do that. And besides, this is a great feature because they also protect your hearing. So it cancels some of the noise that is unpleasant.
I was working with Andrea the other day and said, wow, it cancels out this buzzing sound. And it also improves the sound of the voice. And increasingly, these connections are smoother and they're better. And now these connections are going to be not just to your personal devices, but if you're in the airport, for example, you can connect to the PA system in the airport or in an auditorium, etc. So what we're going to increasingly see is sophisticated connection with a whole bunch of devices, not just your personal devices. Now, it was a very difficult journey, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. For social interactions, hearing is better. This is a relief for us and for our hearing. I think working today, I work better, but it's also more enjoyable. It was difficult before. I think the only downside is that when I've got my device connected and I'm watching something or I'm connected on my cell phone, my son says that I'm in La La Land because I'm just listening on my phone. I'm completely ignoring the people around me. But be that as it is. My takeaway message is hearing loss is not a seven-headed hydra. I use hearing aids. I proudly use them. And I tell everybody about that. I'm here to tell you all that I use it. I'm here talking to 140 people telling you all that I use hearing aids. And this has made me a better person. It's comfortable. I think they're very, very chic, very stylish, and I'm very happy. So thank you so much. I think I'll stop sharing now, but feel free to ask any questions. Thank you so much, Layla. That was very strong. It left such an impact on us, hearing your expressions and how you expressed yourself. We have very dear colleagues who are also facing the same issues that you faced. They need hearing aids, and they're going through that phase where they're accepting it, they're learning it, and hopefully this will be increasingly more accepted, and things that weren't not as obvious or people didn't notice before will now come to the forefront. That's my hope. We have a few questions that have popped up here. Here's the first question from our colleague in Algeria. Let me see if I can find it. You talked about avoiding noises in general, but we talked about the importance of spending time in silent settings. Will this help us if we can isolate ourselves or move off into silent settings? Will this help us? I can answer. Yes, it will. As long as you can. Obviously, that would lead to total social isolation, but hearing rest and resting your ears is absolutely critical. Like Layla was saying, 60-60, there are all those different rules. You used your ears, rest your ears. The real challenge is finding that really silent place. That, I think, is the biggest challenge we face. Correct. Thank you. We have a lot of questions here. Before I get into those questions, please raise your hands if you want. Turn on your mics. But before you speak, please let us know what language you're going to use so that our interpreters, if they need, can use the relay function. Gabriel asked the following question. Are you going to see a worsening, or does our hearing get worse over time just because of age or because of the things the abuse and the things we do to it? Natália, what would you? I can tell you. Abuse is abuse. There's no way around it. We know what it means we know what abuse is, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing as if you don't eat right, it can have a health impact. It's the same thing. What you do is going to have an impact on your health. Yes, you're going to face hearing loss over time, and you're going to face a vision loss over time. Now, of course, genetics are important. Your character, how you live your life is important. And everyone knows a 95-year-old who hears well, who sees well. Yes, genetics are important across the board, but not exaggerating and not abusing and taking good care of your auditory health and your eye health is absolutely critical. So Natália is saying, do the best you can. Thank you so much. Daniel Ehrlich asking, what's the general population's, what's the incidence rate in the general population of hearing loss in perception? We don't know. There's a technical question here. I will look for the answer and then I will share. I actually don't know the incidence of the data that you asked. I don't know about changes in processing over time. We have circumaural phones. Someone's asking about different headphones. There's been a lot of discussion about noise canceling headphones and different types of headphones, and I am not technically skilled to answer these questions. They're excellent questions. We will look for the answers for you, and as soon as we have the answers, we will share them with everybody here. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, that was Ricardo's question, and that I already answered. Claudia Chauvet. Is there anything we can do as almost prophylaxis to avoid hearing loss or to slow it down? Live a healthy life. There's nothing specific. Live your life and take care of your health. Take care of your hearing health. There's nothing you can do, but you can be as careful as possible. Natália? Yep. Everything that we already mentioned. There's not much else. Some sort of special vitamin here or this plant here. Yeah, if you want, sure, take your turmeric and take your ginger, fine. I'm sure they're good for a number of things, but not necessarily for hearing loss. One thing I forgot to mention is habits are important. Let's say we're in an event and let's say we turn up the volume because the speaker is talking really low. It's important to lower the volume for the next speaker because our brain gets used to a specific volume. So remember to turn down that volume, Work with the volume as low as possible. Something else that I forgot to mention that's also very important is there is a difference in the type of work that we do, remote. There's a difference between sound intensity and the amount of information we're getting from the speaker. We often increase the volume but it doesn't give you more information. So in these circumstances, don't turn up the volume, protect your hearing. I know it's like juggling a lot of things at the same time. I'm here, oh my God, I'm at my total limit here. There's nothing else and I've got to turn down the volume, turn up the volume. No, you've got to do it. It's very important to keep both of these things in mind. Wonderful, thank you. Claudia has another question. How can you put the crystals back in place? I know. Go, Layla. So this is really interesting. I learned this. There's a little bit of like a manipulation. Someone actually kind of pushes you one way, pushes you another way, and they pop back into place. There are a number of medications out there, but they're palliative. It doesn't cure it. The only thing you can do is this manipulation. A specialist person kind of lies you down, they put you in a certain position, and boof, they turn your head, puff, puff, and boom, the crystals fall back into place. Sometimes it doesn't work first time around, and you have to do it a second time. And for those of you who have vertigo or labyrinthitis, it seems crazy. But it works. It works. Fernanda has her hand raised. Okay, Fernanda, feel free. Turn on your mic. I joined APIC last year. I work with Denise Lima, but I know we don't have a lot of time. I heard something really interesting. I'm sorry, I'm running out of battery on my headphones. I have a couple people. There are a couple of people in my family who became deaf over time. And some have better experiences and worse experiences. And a lot of things are happening simultaneously. Both my mom and my aunt are facing something that I think is really interesting. When they started using hearing aids, they're at round 3 right now. What they heard from a number of hearing aid specialists and doctors is that you have to use them. That if you just you just lose your hearing, it's not just physical, but you start to lose synapses between your hearing and your ear and your brain. So basically, it becomes like a snowball. So if we have hearing loss, and if we don't treat it, we need to start hearing so that we can have better synapses. Basically, I'm not sure if I'm able to explain it, but basically, we're able to stop it in its tracks if we treat it early. We need to treat hearing losses because all the other connections need to keep happening. And we don't want to lose those over time as well. And these are absolutely critical. These synapses are absolutely critical. And I never heard that before. So if you don't use your hearing aids, you don't make the synapses, and you risk losing those synapses. And I thought that was an important thing to add. Don't push back. Do the hearing tests and use those hearing aids if you need it. Even if we have very little hearing loss, treat it now, treat it early. Andrea raised her hand. And Adriana Machado's had something here. And in fact, this can lead to accelerated dementia if it's left untreated. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. Hearing loss is increasingly associated with dementia, hearing-related dementia. There's no stimulation, there's no social stimulus, and it goes on and on. It creates this it creates a snowball. And we see this in a number of exams. And so anyone in the family, everyone, if you see this with people in your family, you need to insist that people use their hearing aids, just like Layla, who's so excited about using her hearing aids.
Yes, I think that excitement is clear. And that makes us very happy as well, Layla. So I see that we have gone 10 minutes over time. We received many questions, but I think that's a sign that we need a second event with this topic. So I think we can schedule one. And maybe for the next one, I can share my story as well. This is also a very personal story. And I also have an experience with hearing loss. And it was thanks to this initiative that I was diagnosed with hearing loss. And now I wear a hearing aid and I've adapted to it very well. So that could be another session. Célia, anything else? Well, there are some questions that we won't be able to answer, but I'll try to get you an answer afterwards. Mariela Andrade, I don't think I have your contact information, but if you want to send it to us, we will send answers back to you. So before we wrap up, I'd like to thank our dear interpreters once again. Despite a slight delay, they're still here, strong in English. In English and Portuguese, we have Melissa Mann and Robert Greathouse. In French, Célia, sorry to interrupt, but before we continue to name them, can we ask them to turn on their cameras? Yes, if you can, please. And we'll give you a hello. So thank you. And then afterwards, if you're still here with us, if you haven't gone off to bed, if you're not having breakfast, or if you're not there with your families, we're going to have a family photo afterwards. Carry on, Célia. Okay, so we have Melissa Mann and Robert Greathouse in the Portuguese booth. We have Cristiano Sanchez, and we had Alicia de Coche in Spanish. And we also have our colleagues. In Chinese, we have Dennis Poletsky and Olivia Yu. And in Russian, we have Asiel Karam and Nikolai Ulano. You were very kind. You were great. Thank you very much. Well, it's too bad that this is the end of our time. I almost don't want to wrap up. We didn't have enough time, but again, we're going to schedule other events like this one. I think this is a part of our association's rules, not only in helping people to overcome any hearing loss that they might have, but also in creating awareness about prevention. So thank you very much for joining us. And let's give our interpreters a hand once again. It was all thanks to you. It was due to your work that we were able to be seen around the world. So thank you. I hope that we were able to take a group picture. If so, well, not everyone turned on their cameras, but we were able to get a picture of everyone who did. All right, that's great. That's all, everyone. Thank you very much. Good night, or have a good day. And I hope that we can have other events like this. Thank you, and congratulations for this event. And a special thank you to everyone working in the organization teams at APIC and AIIC Brazil for their time, for their work. Thank you very much. And Daniel, who's helping us to monitor interpretation, Daniel Ehrlich, thank you very much.